Hey folks, I'm Nikki Adamson. I'm the founder and CEO of Hustle Hunters. I'm really excited today to bring on our senior operations manager, Arielle, to share a little bit more about how we've oriented our internal culture and work days, specifically in terms of how many hours we work. Let me bring her into this conversation as well. I'd like to welcome you all, those of you joining live, as well as those of you who are joining as part of a recording. We're available. We love this topic and are happy to answer as many questions as we can in the future as well. So you can always reach out to us. For the most part, anything Hustle Hunters can be found at hustlehunters.com. Awesome, well, Arielle, thanks so much for being available today to share really what was your brainchild and project that you really took from conception through some, I would say, barriers at the leadership level in myself and through implementation on our team. So I'm glad to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for trusting me with this process. It was a big learning experience and so much fun.
Yeah, so when we talk about a 4-day work week, I think there's so many different ways that we can look at that. It's something we've seen people talk about Europe and all these, there's like some experiences. I think many of us think altruistically, like, yeah, of course, 3-day weekend, like I go away all the time. So I wanted to kind of cue everyone in to get the conversation started about like, what is our 4-day work week? What does that look like at Hustle Hunters now? And then we'll back ourselves up and get into the, how did we get here? What were some of the tactics and more specific things we've done as we thought about rolling this out at Hustle Hunters? But now, like, when we think of the topic 4-day work week, what does it mean for us?
Yeah, so we have a flexible working schedule still, even though we've switched to a 4-day work week. But we do have 2 days of core hours. So Tuesday and Thursday from, I'm going to use EST, from, I think, is it 2 to 5 EST? We have our core meeting hours. That's when all internal meetings happen. That's when we have some co-working slots. That's when we have our all hands meeting. So everyone is required to be available during those times to attend those meetings, barring like medical appointments or things that can't be shifted. But beyond that, your schedule is your own to set. If you want to work 2 hours on a Sunday because that works best for your life, you totally can. I think a lot of our team has found that working Monday through Thursday has been really great, but we've had other people who work Monday, Tuesday, half day Wednesday, Thursday, and then a half day Friday. There's a lot of variations. I think it changes, and people are still, because we've been doing a pilot, people have tried a lot of different structures for it, but essentially at the end of the week, your work has to add up to 32 hours total, but that includes your PTO, your sick time, your actual focused hours that you're working, our core hours, and also like every day that you work, you get a half-hour time for lunch. So, well, it doesn't have to be lunch, but it all adds up to 32 at the end of the week.
Yeah, so 40, including like that extra rest time, which is great. Yeah, for me, the term that really drove this home for us and kind of like what was Hustle Hunters about this was I felt like we had a really flexible working schedule. Felt like I kind of flow through my day of taking a bath or reading a book and then doing a bunch of work and then going and talking to a friend or getting coffee and then coming and doing some more work. And I kind of felt like there was this flow and I felt like I was really in charge of what I did. And then through Arielle's prompting, kind of started to realize like, but I'm working all the time. And I kind of realized like, that's not really what I want. I don't want to work all the time. I actually want to be able to shut my laptop and really feel like good about that transition in the end. So the term for me that's really stuck out is this focus, that it's really about focusing and honing, planning out how we get there, but really focusing and honing what our time does, saying that 32 hours is actually all we need to do the work that we typically think of as like a full-time role that typically just like societally we've allocated 40 hours to. Yeah, that really, I keep coming back to that one a lot. Awesome. So do you want to chat about how we got here?
Sure. So we did a retreat back in May. That was all of everyone on the team. We met together, and Nikki was really pushing us to like own Hustle Hunters, and what we wanted, where we wanted Hustle Hunters to go forward as we sort of shifted a little bit. And I obviously came at this from like an ops perspective and started thinking about, or rather I was seeing all this energy and excitement from our team. And I loved it. And I also wondered how sustainable it was. I know I had come into Hustle Hunters from being really burned out. And so I'd started at part-time, and having that time to take care of myself and still be able to work was really nice, because it was a nice transitionary period, because I still had time to like rest and take care of myself without like sacrificing all of my social life or all of my personal responsibilities. And so that was sort of part of it. But just wondering how we could make this sustainable for our team, because the excitement was so palpable and so great. And there was, at the time, there was also a lot of buzz about 4-day work weeks I had been seeing, and I was kind of curious about it. And so I floated it to Nikki like very softly, and she was like, "That's great. I don't know if it would work for us." So I did a little more research, because I started thinking harder about it, and seeing more examples of it being done differently. And part of our retreat was thinking, how do we remain at like the cutting edge of the hiring field? How do we practice what we preach, so to speak? We were doing it in so many other areas, and the flexible working arrangement was really great. But I was also finding I was working really long hours because I was excited about it, and working really long hours because you're excited is great, but at some point you start to burn out. And I wanted to get in front of that a little bit. So that's sort of when I started introducing it to him, poking you a little bit more about it. Like, hey, Nikki, what if we did it a different way? What if it doesn't quite look like what you're thinking? What if we continue having our flexibility? What would that look like? And I didn't have all the answers, but it was really interesting to talk a lot of that through with you.
Yeah, and for me, I would say that the two, as like a business leader, the two things that stuck out to me were, one, I felt like the term 4-day work week felt very inflexible, very one size fits all, but not really. And knowing that some folks in our team, sometimes it's nice to have the mornings. We prefer to start our days later or end earlier, whatever our caregiving needs or kind of personal sleep schedules look like.
Mm-hmm.
That was definitely one for me, is like we kind of leaned in pretty hard to flexibility I didn't want to take away that autonomy. And I think that was a misconception for me at just this topic, without having done that research, that you helped to combat. So folks out there who are looking to kind of bring your leaders on board to what could this look like? We'll kind of dig into more of that as this conversation continues, but I would say that was one of them, like recognizing that 4-day work week doesn't necessarily have to be 4-day work week, right? Doesn't mean that, okay, no one works on Fridays and everyone's just traveling. There's a lot of different things that it could look like. And then it doesn't mean we just leave our customers high and dry, right? There's ways to customize it beyond that. And then the other one for me was just really thinking about trust. Like, do we trust our team enough and like tied to productivity, to still produce, to still be at a place where like we're making placements and we're coaching, consulting our clients? Because at the end of the day, although we love our clients and love the candidates that we work with, it is imperative as a business that we make money. So as we're kind of chatting through this with business leaders who might be on this listening here, those are things that work for me, but we'd love to kind of hear from y'all later and hear like what are the specific things that you're worried about, and see if we might be able to work through those with y'all and see if this could be an interesting process that you're looking to build into your business and systems as well.
One thing that I found really interesting in my research, and people might have heard of this already, but it's called Parkinson's Law, and it's the idea that work expands to fill the time available. If you work 60 hours, then you will have enough work for 60 hours. If you work 40 hours, you will make that happen. And so I sort of brought that to, I think that was one of the things that you started thinking a little bit harder about, like, oh, like I could just keep working, and how does that serve me if I do? But there's a lot, I took a lot of my research. 4-Day Global is this company out of New Zealand that was founded by, I think the company is called Private Guardian, but the owner of that put his company onto it. And in New Zealand, it was prefaced because they were trying to stop the traffic that was going on. They were having such a huge issue with traffic in one of the main cities that they did a big report about how they could decrease traffic. And part of that was 4-day work weeks, and that also increased productivity. And so that was a really interesting jumping off point. And then I did Buffer released a lot of blog posts chronicling their journey and like pilots and how they worked through shifting into a 4-day work week. And that was really helpful because they're a startup and they also had a bunch of different teams that needed different things. So that really started me thinking about how our team could customize it for us.
Yeah, that's great. So would you say that there's like more research than anyone could read through? Like, where's the research at in terms of like being able to wrap your mind around what are the options here?
Yeah. Well, recently the New York Times put out that article about a 4-day work week, which admittedly I haven't read yet because I wasn't logged in. But that one was interesting to see come out recently. There's a lot of news articles about it. But 4-Day Global has a lot of, they have a white paper that I was reading and really has a lot of reference in it. But that and Buffer was really where I was finding it. I can release some more sources afterwards, but those are the two that are easiest to name drop and easiest to like Google.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think back for me, as you were doing this research and kind of like represented this to me, were there things that you wanted to make sure that you called out?
In terms of the research?
Yeah. Did you find that there were certain themes that like, and I'll share in a minute, like what started to change my mind, but I'm kind of curious from you when you wanted to make that like really educated case.
Yeah. I think I really started to dig into, and it was something I had believed before, was that it was more important that it's not how many hours you're like sitting at your desk. It's like the actual work that you're doing and sort of readjusting that. I think the what is it? The 80-20 principle, that 80% of productivity can be achieved in 20% of our time. Not to say we shouldn't work at all, but the idea that it's more like the impact of your work is more important than the time you spend doing it. And how do you really hone that in a sense? Mm-hmm. Other things that I thought were interesting in general, just like as a very brief summary, like 4-day work weeks has been shown to increase like retention, employee satisfaction, employee trust, both between managers and supervisors and employees, but also like between employees, because you have to trust that your fellow employee is doing their work so you can do yours. Like that async trust is there. Also like productivity, commitment, like people are more excited to do work when they are able to handle their personal things without the risk of their job or like their free time. And then there was another piece of that it really helps improve gender balance. Like having a flexible work arrangement is really important, but having a 4-day work week means that caregivers are better able to show up and have jobs. Like a mom with kids at home who doesn't have childcare all the time is better able to work because it's more flexible. You know, there's less hours to account for childcare. So I thought that was all very interesting and very in line with like the Hustle Hunters ethos in general.
Yeah, and we work with startup teams to help them hire great talent. Thinking that diverse teams include historically excluded talent groups. So that's caregivers, that's folks of color. You know, there's so many different demographics and geographies and lived experiences that fit into that. But recognizing that flexibility is something we hear over and over and over again is like that biggest deal breaker that needs to be a part of it. And what we've learned internally at Hustle Hunters, at least I've learned, is that flexibility and structure can actually coexist really well together. That some of the best flexibility has happened when there is really strong structure and context, because similar to what I think so many of us have learned about an unlimited PTO policy is that everyone kind of uses it differently. And that kind of depends on your manager, and no one really feels like they've earned it. And it can be, you know, there's all sorts of discussions about that. So we have a minimum 3-week policy, lots of internal holidays, but we track that and make sure that everyone takes at least 3 weeks a year. And then beyond that, you know, it's discretionary. So trying to find that mold that I've learned pretty much every time we've added structure to flexibility, we've seen actually improved and increased use of the flexibility. Because they found a lot of folks didn't feel like they had permission to really leverage the flexibility. Has been just something that I've learned. And then for me personally, my mind really shifted here after hearing this from Arielle. Started thinking pretty seriously, what would this look like in my own personal day? Let me stop thinking like CEO me and think of me as an operator, an executor. And we took Juneteenth off as a holiday. My partner's job did not take it off, and my child was still in school. So recognizing that I had this day that I wasn't supposed to work, and I wasn't supposed to be a partner, and I wasn't supposed to be, most of my friends didn't have the day off. I wasn't mom. I got to like dig through all the different pieces. I have a lot of chronic health needs that I got to really dig into, and actually take care of myself and make myself a breakfast that fit within my weird dietary restrictions and do all those things. And I realized like, oh, this is gonna actually like give me time and permission to do things for myself, which so often falls to the last piece of that. And then that kind of ties into this other learning I've had and just this recognition that specifically caregivers of the last 3 years through COVID, this is taking a toll on us from our mental health to even our physical health. And we're starting to see research around that, of the amount of appointments and things that folks are booking that they've lagged on just because there's so much else on their mind. We're caregivers for the last 3 years, like we're probably going to live shorter lives because of this 3 years of intense stress than previous generations and probably than future generations. And that's like a pretty big thing. And I can't ignore that as an employer, right? Recognizing, I provide health insurance for employees, that outside of, giving everyone a $300,000 nanny stipend to hire around the clock caregiving support. We're a team that centers caregiving, not that we're all caregivers. But that felt really important to me, that this is something I could do to actually move the needle to help my team take care of themselves. Not saying, oh, go to the spa, go get a massage on your own time. We're saying like, do this on like what used to be work time.
Yeah. I think when we first started talking about the details of this, you phrased it as giving 8 hours back to our employees. And like, that's what it is. It's 8 hours that previously was, dictated to work. It's not formally set out to like be for your kids or your family or anyone else. Like it's a little easier to make space in your life for it.
Yeah, when I think of vacation, I think I want to go to Europe and sit in a coffee shop and people watch. I'm like, why do I have to go like to Europe to do that? Those are some of my like most memorable moments on vacations. Mm-hmm. And I realized, oh, it's because I have the permission that I can't do anything else. Mm-hmm. I realized, oh, I could do that in my own city. Mm-hmm. As long as I have kind of that time in my days and give myself that permission. So I've taken up crafting and done all sorts of things. But let's shift over into how we did this. So what have been the keys? How did you go about like doing this implementation at Hustle Hunters?
Yeah, so this ended up being kind of a long process because we weren't ready to do it. Like I knew when I introduced the idea to Nikki, it was like we as a team couldn't do it successfully yet. Like there were a lot of changes structurally that needed to happen. And so first step that we did was we implemented a project management tool to like up our async work and to create some more norms around how we did our work and how we asked each other to help like create that collaboration, cross-cultural or cross-departmental collaboration. And I think that was huge. So that really set the stage for us being able to do like more specifically async one where we only had those Tuesday, Thursday overlap. But after that, in the process of that, I did a lot of work to check in with our team. I was learning all of our workflows, seeing like what needed to be optimized, how we could get Asana into that, and also interviewing everyone on the team to like see what are the pain points, what's working well for you, how do you like to work, what is helpful for you long term. And I think I learned a lot in terms of like during that process that really informed how I planned both the rollout and how we were going to do our focus work week. But it wasn't really like, it was a rollout. Like we didn't just start it. I think we had 2 weeks before we actually started it that were 4-day weeks due to holidays. And for both of them, I asked the team like, hey, just think about your week. Like start thinking about how you spend your time. What makes it harder with a shorter work week? Like, what are the things that trip you up? What is a time suck? What isn't? What helps you move faster on those weeks? So all of that, I think, really helped prep our team to start thinking about how they use their time. And I think two of the biggest things beyond that, like async support from our project management tool, that have really made a difference in how successful we've been is really pushing monotasking, which is so counter to, I think, a lot of folks who want to move fast, who want to get a lot of work done. But monotasking really just lets you get more work done, more like at a higher quality. Humans are not actually good at splitting their attention. I personally am very bad at it. I know this. So I don't. Like, I'm not someone who can watch TV and like write at the same time. But I think some people try to do 5 things at once and it feels like you're doing so much. But monotasking, I think, has really helped our team. It feels counterintuitive, but like slow down in order to do the work more intentionally. And sort of in combination with that and building off of that is this idea that planning is really important. And it can be really easy when you work 40 plus hours a week to not plan, because you can always just keep working and find something to work at. But when your time is limited, being more intentional about your week and what you're doing and how you're doing it, you have less time to sort of stare at the computer. Like, if you plan and have a plan, and it's easier, so you don't have to have that like decision fatigue in the moment. You know what you're supposed to be working on. You're not spending half your like brain power thinking about what to do. That pre-planning lets you just jump in and do it and focus on the work by monotasking. And I think those 2 things have been really crucial in how we've moved forward with this.
Yeah. And Arielle, you mentioned the feeling of productivity, I think is something we really had to unpack and debunk. I've seen that what makes us feel productive, what makes it feel like we can end our day, feeling like we finished what we set out to do realistically, and recognizing that, okay, you can feel really productive as long as you just felt like you had tons of work to do and you got a lot of it done. But, is it just that we sourced a bunch of candidates, or is that we sourced candidates that actually made it through? And I would say we can talk about metrics in a little bit, but one thing that I've noticed in our team in the big shift is that we're sourcing more consistent volumes of candidates, but more of those candidates we're sourcing, I wouldn't say that we're necessarily sourcing more candidates, but more of the candidates we're sourcing are advancing through in the stages. So our quality has improved. And I think so much of that is due to this planning and just the monotasking and recognizing that the opportunity cost of our time is much higher now. And we need to be more strategic. And if we're more strategic about what we do, we can actually set realistic goals. And finishing those goals can feel really good at the end of the day, instead of just feeling like we were busy. That a busy day doesn't necessarily mean a good day.
Yeah, I agree. So those were like 2 of the main like things that I built this rollout around. But we also had to do a lot of shifts, like in terms of our ops and also in terms of our company, our like business norms. But in terms of the operations things that we had to shift, we really had to think hard about how sick time and PTO was counted and like what was a day. What we ended up doing is that for a 32-hour work week, we split that into 5. And so I think 6.5 hours meant for a day. So that informed like a day of PTO was 6.5 hours. So that was what that would count for. And people could use that however they choose to. But that made it a little easier to do like the math side of things. And then it also helped us. We do, for every 6.5 hours that you work, like you get 30 minutes that are your break. We didn't want to be super prescriptive about what that break was. Most people take it as a lunch break. Some people take a walk, whatever it is. But that was important. And so also for the 6.5 hour days, that meant that for holidays, people could take those 6.5 hours wherever they would like. That was a holiday. It didn't have to be on the day. Most people choose to, but sometimes they shift it around a little bit. But yeah, those op shifts, I think, made it clear to our team what it meant when we were saying, like, gave numbers and gave those guidelines, gave that structure for people to have that freedom to take it.
Yeah, and then tactically, I noticed here, working with the team individually, it was a little bit of a shift for us. I mean, I love calendar blocking, have long been a fan of calendar blocking, but every time I do it, I need to like reboot it after a couple months, because then I find myself ignoring the blocks that I held for myself. So a few ways that helped with our team recognizing we all visualize and think about time differently was, some of it was just like literally cutting out strips of paper and putting them all on a printed out calendar of a week to figure out, where do I want to spend my time? And Arielle, you found some really good guiding articles thinking about doing this for health reasons. So plan your sleep first. Plan your family time second. Plan what was the next one is like your personal needs. then work into that within the assumptions that, if you're client facing, you should probably not only work in the middle of the night when you're trying to take calls. It has to work within your job, with your manager, with your team. And again, building in those core team hours, but like structuring that, again, adding that framework and structure, I found was helpful. The other great tool we ended up using a lot was just Google Calendar. Just playing around and moving and dragging and dropping, getting large sections for monotasking has been a helpful way that like there's also some visibility across our team.
And going into like one of the norms that we shifted was calendaring. We shifted, Google has I think it's called speedy meeting setting. And one of the norms that we shifted was for our meetings. We changed it so that every meeting had to have an agenda. Every meeting ended, we would do 25 minutes or 50-minute blocks. And like I said, we condensed them to 2 days, but in terms of those like 25 to 50-minute blocks, we didn't want to get rid of connection entirely. So we would just open up the Zoom room like 10 minutes before the meeting would actually start. And that's when people could socialize, because that was important to us, but making sure that we were sort of being efficient with our meeting time, instead of just taking up time to take up time, I think really helped. Because before this, during my interviews with everyone was very much like, oh, we have too many meetings, like they're all over the place, like they break up my day so much. And so our condensed core hours was really born out of what our team was saying they wanted, or what they were voicing as a frustration. And I think there was a little confusion when we started, and then after that, like I didn't hear that anymore. Like it was a constant refrain, and then it was just gone.
Yeah, another piece of this that I think was challenging that we worked through with a couple different options was, okay, how do we make connection? How does our team connect with each other? Is that in the beginning of meetings? Is that at the end of meetings? Like, what is that? Where does that fit in? What meetings are just kind of designed to shoot the shit, to just be human around each other? And what meetings are intentional to like do this work? Because we found that, I think, depending on what our schedule was for the day, some people had earlier meetings and later meetings that I think we weren't 100% aligned on that before. Can you talk a little bit about what we found some success there?
Yeah. One thing that we really bulked up in terms of connection was adding co-working as a concept to our team. We hadn't really, it's not that it hadn't been done before, but it wasn't called that, and it wasn't an intentional thing that people were doing. It was longer meetings, more meetings. And I had been doing it with Catherine, the DIB program manager, for a little bit for a couple projects we were working on. We set time aside every week. And sometimes it was a meeting for strategizing, and sometimes we just co-worked. And I like co-working. I co-work with a couple people like outside of this organization, because it really helps me just to have someone else who is quietly working. Like it's nice to check in and then just do our work with a buddy, even when I'm home by myself. But we set up some co-working hours. And it's kind of dependent on the week whether people take advantage of them. But when they happen, like people show up, they enjoy it, they get work done. And then the other piece of like connection is we've revamped our Slack. We had a lot of channels. We had a lot of needs.
Lots of unnecessary Slack.
I know. So I condensed them all, whether or not people are upset I didn't hear about it, but condensed them all into like some broad topics, and then we kept a couple specific ones, and then I opened up a different one that sort of condensed all of our like social bits, and I called it water cooler for lack of a better word, but that's for people like post pictures of their pets or their favorite music that they're listening to that day, or something exciting that happened to them over the weekend. And just like shared their personal stuff there, which it's like, it's not a workspace. It's just a place where like, and it's a very well used channel so far.
Yeah. Adding Donut, I think.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. I added, there's this add-on to Slack called Donut, which, there's a celebration channel, which we use that's separate, that reminds people when it's people's birthdays, which is great for an async team, especially when you're on different time zones. And then it also has this water cooler feature where it just like asks, you can choose how often it will ask the team questions in this channel. And you can add channels or you can add questions to it. It's really customizable. I really love it. It's been great, but people love to answer questions.
Yeah. I mean, Erica and I got into a pretty epic Get4 the other day as prompted by the donut. So I'm feeling very connected, but it can be more of an async connection, which I hadn't recognized that we were able to do as well as we could, which was really great. It didn't have to just be like in person. And then the other one that's really been valuable for me is the Slack icon norms that you set out. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Slack has this option that I think we probably most people have seen, but it's the ability to set a status. But you have the option to set like, I think 5 or 6 default ones. And so I reset ours and I kept it to, I wrote them down because I always forget one of them. We have one for out of office, which is just generic for whatever you're out of office for. We didn't want to be that specific about it because we don't need to know. If you're out sick, that's fine. If you want to share that, that's also fine. But it wasn't crucial. We have another one for co-working. So if you want a co-working buddy, you can throw that up as your Slack channel. We have one for focus work, which is when you're like head down, deep work. You don't want to be disturbed unless it's an emergency, but you're working. We have another one that is you're there and available. So if somebody needs to check in with you, you're there. We have one for in a meeting. And then we have 2 like ones that aren't in the defaults that our team kind of knows, which is if you have a day where you have a lot of care interruptions, like your care is no longer available or someone's sick and so you're in charge of your kid or whoever you're caring for, just to like know that your team will know that you need a little extra grace that day because you got a little more on your plate than you were expecting. And then vacation, because that's fun.
I think we wrote into that like any interruptions will be responded to with like severe FOMO.
Yes.
So,
and silence.
Yeah, and I think it's just made it really easy that when you're sick, it's like literally you just change the icon. You don't have to ask, you don't have to do anything. You can log it into Gusto later. But I found that that's been a really easy way for us me as a leader, to have a sense of like, what's our capacity look like today? And then just for our team to have that shared language. So we're not having to figure out like, we've talked a lot about how, I don't know, the emoji that apparently is sweating, like I thought was like, I don't know, right? We're not having to like interpret what people are, where people are at.
Yeah, I think a lot of my work with Hustle Hunter so far has been making it so our team has to not think as hard about simple things. And like that includes this communication piece where it's easy to see at a glance, like if someone's available to chat in real time or not.
Yeah.
Because that really informs like what you might do in the next half hour. Yeah. And it just makes it a lot easier to move forward.
Totally. Arielle, can you tell us a little bit about the rollout? You've mentioned like kind of rolling this out. That was, it wasn't just magic. You didn't just snap fingers and we had all the kinks figured out. So yeah, if you can talk a little bit to us from like an operational mindset for folks who are looking to implement this in their organizations.
Yeah. So like I said, I did all of those interviews and sort of built around that based on what I thought we would need. And I had a very pretty lesson plan, so to speak, of like what to roll out each week and like what to share with the team and what tools everyone should have by what point. And I had to change it like 5 times just based on, I think when I was making it, 1, it felt really good to be able to pivot based on the needs of the team. But 2, I don't think I really took into account like how some shifts would bring things that I thought would be more important later in the quarter to the forefront. I think the Slack norms was one of those. Like there was a lot of questions around that about availability and like when we were supposed to be on and available if we were on the shortened week. Like, and that was another piece of setting guidelines and like structure and that flexibility that made it easier for people to like relax and do what they needed to do. But yeah, I had to shift like when the Slack norms were going to be rolled out. I think there was something else that
like Slack norms, calendaring norms. We went through, because I feel like we did it in kind of waves. Well, for me, as someone who is like adopting new processes, to not have to completely overhaul every process that I had, but I also knew we had a lot of challenging discussions of what does go first, because they all tie in so well to each other.
Yeah, and I think I bumped up some different options of like how to plan your week, like using time blocking versus planning ahead, or, just some different ways that people could do that scheduling without getting to Friday and go, oh no, I have 12 hours left. Like that's not a good Friday.
I also thought it was really interesting that, we had this curriculum that you mentioned, we kind of kept audibling of what the order and how you rolled it out was, but, we've been operating as a business for years without a significant section of like, how do we communicate on Slack of when we're available and when we're not? And it wasn't until you did calendar norms that all of a sudden our Slack was, and meeting, everyone kept jumping in proactively, which was awesome, that it felt so natural. It was just, I don't know, really nice that organically we were able to share like, good news, next week we've already built that out and we'll be adding these new norms. So I felt like it all just like made sense once we started getting into it, even though in the beginning I think it's hard to believe, like hard to figure out, is this, can we section it out week by week to do it once? If you could do it again, would you do it in a similar way?
I think I would, because really it is such like a building process, and it felt really beneficial to both myself and the team, because I was doing it too. Really beneficial to myself and the team to be able to like build on the skills as we went and just integrate things one at a time. I mean, I think I really wanted to just like do it all at once and get it over with and just start doing it all. But we made a lot of changes. Like it was not a small shift. And it wasn't just a shift of how many hours a week we were doing. Like it was a structural shift, both on like the back end of how we planned our weeks and also just like how we were connecting with each other. So I think that slow rollout and making sure our team had the tools and being able to slow down when we needed to or jump ahead, like based on what our team was needing in the moment, was really, really good. I think if I could do it differently, I would want to have a bigger team so I could track metrics a little bit better. Because it is really hard to do it on a small team with not enough people on the back end to do it. But overall, I think the structure of it, I would do the same.
Yeah, and in terms of metrics, I think this is an important thing, as you mentioned, doing research, white papers, and we're seeing productivity. And in our team, what were you thinking about in terms of metrics? And I know obviously we're a small team, so there were some limitations there. Can you talk to me a little bit about how metrics have played into this rollout?
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of my work that I've done with you guys is really hard to like have hard numbers for. But it's really interesting to see the things that aren't hard numbers. Like I think once we integrated Asana into our work and people started using it, it wasn't just learning how to use it, they were using it. I feel like there was one week where it sort of clicked for everyone, and all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, my week's like so organized, like I'm getting so much done. And it wasn't really necessarily connected to Asana right away. But that was the correlation. It's just this addition of ease into how to do your work, which, is my goal. Like I want things to require less thought to do them well because it's structured in a way that makes sense.
And it's a tricky thing to measure because so often it's easier to think of when were the times I was frustrated today, whereas when were the times I used to have been frustrated doing that task but didn't notice that I was frustrated because it was so seamless. Well, it was so seamless, we didn't notice it. So it's hard to track some of those data points.
Yeah. But some of the metrics we were kind of looking at, I did a poll in Slack every week, which, had mixed results whether people responded to it or not, but just like, how do you feel logging off? And for the most part, if there wasn't like anything like a big stressful thing that happened that week or whatever it was, for the most part, people tended to feel good about logging off, which I think I was worried people wouldn't feel that way having a shortened week, feeling like they hadn't gotten their work done. But in general, it seemed like people felt pretty good about it. I got a lot of feedback about how they were able to, like, team members were able to spend that time, whether it was taking time for a walk with a friend or feeling less stressed about going to a doctor's appointment. It's a lot of little things like that that tend to add up. I noticed our team was really like focused during meetings once they were condensed and on one day. I think having the meetings stacked like that could be a little tiring. but I was hearing that even when it was tiring, being able to have the uninterrupted hours outside of that didn't have meetings really made a difference in actually being able to do that deep work.
Yeah, I've really been looking forward to my focus days. And then for me, I found that I split my 8 hours back into 2 afternoons. And I found that to be really helpful. Just a little bit more available to folks as a CEO. That felt important to me. But then in the beginning, I was trying to shift it like, oh, this week I need my hours here. And I realized I was getting myself into the same trap I'd been in. It was too flexible, that I needed that structure. I needed that rigidity to say, oh, it's a meeting I make with myself. I wouldn't blow you off for a meeting. Why would I skip out? So it was a little bit of it for me. I had to learn how to value me. But I mean, I think personally for me, I'm healthier.
Yeah.
I actually schedule doctor's appointments now and put the time into doing some of that, like harder digging through doctor notes to figure out what's that test I need to take and who's that one doctor who does this that's complicated calendar, and doing all that slightly harder stuff. And then I get really excited. I do crafts and I plan that in to my days, and I read during the week and some of that. So when I think of my mental health, I mean, it's really night and day for me, and that's something I hadn't recognized was going to be as big of a thing here. And then I know the other metric we really called out was productivity. Our goal was maintain.
Yeah.
Was gain all these other benefits and maintain productivity.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of cross-functional work, I think it's really shifted.
Yeah. And I think there's that piece you're talking about earlier about how our recruiting team was able to source more candidates that went on. Like, it's not that they were sourcing more, but the candidates that they are sourcing are a better fit for the roles that we're doing.
Yeah, and then we've also been scarcity. I think that's Twitter's model of like scarcity breeds creativity. Mm-hmm. And that having these hours, when we back plans, some of the recruiters have, back planned out, okay, we need to talk to this many candidates to get this many people fit to get you bring it down the funnel, and realizing I literally am not going to have time to source that many candidates to go across the roles that I'm working, which has led to us having to think more about how we use our tools and how we can be more efficient, but also what are some more creative ways that we can start solving these pieces that we kind of probably should have done before. But when we had this open-ended work week, we just kind of threw more time at it, as opposed to having to sit back and be more strategic. And I think that's been like the name of the game here for us, is where could we be more strategic, working smarter, instead of just working harder. Yeah. We think of hustle. So many of us define what is hustle to us. Hustle doesn't just mean like grinding forever until there's nothing left. Hustle for us means we're strategic enough that we know where to put our energy. Mm-hmm. And this just like is another example of that for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my backwards planning skills have improved so much since starting this. I'm a planner anyways, but this has really challenged me because if I don't plan, like I don't get my work done the way I need to. And I think that's been a really nice learning experience. And just having to slow down enough to do that planning has been really helpful. Like not giving into like I got to do everything. Sure, but I need to start first with a plan because that will help me actually get things done.
Yeah, and then Catherine, our DEIB lead, we talk a lot about slowing down to be strategic in DEIB work. When you're thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, that's such a critical moment because otherwise you're probably going to be running in the wrong direction. Mm-hmm. And just kind of applying that across our business has been really valuable. So we mentioned this a little bit, but were there other challenges that you wanted to kind of highlight that we went through? No, this is not just rose-colored glasses. We've actually been rolling this out and actively part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, some of it was having to shift around my lesson plan and sort of be able to pivot really quickly based on like what our team was needing. Mm-hmm. Like I could have carried on with what I had originally planned and that wouldn't have suited us. Like it would not have helped us. I think we had some challenges at the start. I think I was really worried, especially that we wouldn't have time to sort of settle into what it felt like and learn from that. it kind of reminded me about what they say when you go from when you take kids out of school to homeschool them or to unschool them, and how for a lot of them there's like a good chunk of time, like months to a year, where they just like don't do anything because they're still sort of like decompressing from school and that structure, to having more autonomy and being able to sort of lead their own education in a sense. And that's sort of what I was expecting from our team. I mean, our team had a much shorter period in which to sort of figure that out, but I was a little bit worried that we'd have too big a dip to continue into figuring it out. So I was really glad you trusted us, and like you trusted me and the team to sort of move through that. Because it can be a really scary moment where everyone seems like, oh no,
we just change everything about how we work.
Right. And so that adjustment period, I think it went better than I expected. And like, I was glad that you trusted us to have room and didn't see it as failure. You saw it as like iteration and like ways to learn how to do this work, because it is such a shift from, the being really hell bent on productivity as like the bottom line versus like, how do we do the work well and productively without burning ourselves out? Like it's a much more balanced equation. And
that iteration theme is one that you kind of put throughout a lot of our curriculum, and it said, try one new tool this week.
Yep.
Put it in your toolbox. I found to be really helpful. So if you're looking to roll this out, I think we're trying to build the case internally to see what's this going to look like before full on investing. I think thinking through monotasking, thinking through some of those other like time management or time planning tools, and rolling those out to the team. Again, not as the end all be all, we're going to solve everyone's problems, but just adding tools to the toolbox. Some weeks I need different tools than other weeks. Some of those little things I think can help move the needle to showcase that our vision of time can be different and how that ties into productivity for sure. We also talk about metrics being challenging. Can you share a little bit more about the challenge of metrics there?
Yeah, I think metrics in general can be challenging when you're talking about, employee satisfaction and what that looks like. I think it would have been a disservice for us to try and gather as much metrics as possible before starting, and like put off the start date. Had that lack of metrics hold us off from starting this. As much as I would love to have more numbers around this, I can see it in our team and like how we all work that it's not necessarily quantifiable metrics, but like quality is there. Like that has not decreased. Like you said, maintaining productivity was kind of top of mind while we were doing this, and I would argue it's been fine.
Yeah, and there's some numbers we have behind that, right? Like looking at Asana tasks as they're done, and like there's ways that we've been quantifying it. But yeah, I think that's the thing that came across to us is that it would have been really easy. We think of this with like D&I work as well. I know Catherine.
Yeah,
it's very easy to let the lack of easily accessible metrics roadblock us from going forward on initiatives that like we really think are going to work. There's enough evidence out there from, pretty much many organizations that have rolled this out. And that pilots are a really great tool to have in the toolbox in that situation. So we rolled it out as a pilot, which again, helped us kind of dig into this iteration phase that, give it a few weeks, we kind of went for 3 months saying like, let's try it for the quarter. And it all realized, oh, this is actually working for us, and have moved beyond that now. But I found that was an easy way for me as a leader to say, we're going to try this thing and see where it gets us. And now that we've seen the data, we have the case to continue moving forward. To be honest, now it would be really hard, I think, for me to go back. Now that I've seen what my life can be in this new structure, again, that like perfect mix of flexibility, autonomy meets structure. So I don't have to think about what I'm doing. I kind of like understand what that's going to look like. It's been a total game changer for me. I don't really believe in the 40-hour work week anymore, despite, 6 months ago, I was actually pretty hesitant about this. So thank you, Arielle, for rolling this out.
Yeah, thank you for the trust and being willing to make it a process of iteration. I think it's been great.
Yeah, when I think of burnout, we're definitely, I don't find that our team is kind of on the brink of burnout as much, even though we're doing really big work and trying to, there's always going to be pressure, right? We're always going to want to make the next placement or book the next consulting gig or deliver on those things. And we want to have a really high set of work there. But I'm finding that in focusing, we spend most of our time on things that are actually impactful and move the needle there. And it's making it feel a lot healthier, both our work health and that we're doing the right work, as well as our personal health and our family's health.
Yeah, I've seen our team really dig into like prioritization as a skill and not just something that they are looking to from their supervisors. Like it's something that they practice in their own work.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is something that every organization I'm part of is something that I'm going to want to think about. But again, recognizing to like what we brought up in the beginning, that it does need to be customized to the team. It does need to look at, are you a hybrid environment? Are you in offices? Are you remote?
What do your customers need?
Yeah, what exactly? Like there's so many pieces into it that for me, that's been a big learning, is that we can bring focus in a strategic way that actually like enhances the ethos of our culture as opposed to overhauling it. Which has been great. Any closing thoughts from you that you want to kind of share with our listeners who are potentially thinking of rolling this out or curious, have questions?
Yeah, I think for me, this is so in line with like the Hustle Hunters ethos of like being human and doing our best work and learning and grit and knowing that we could try it as a pilot and iterate based on what worked and what didn't. And, it was wild to me how much of it worked right off the bat. Our team took to it so well. And like I've been able to hone so many skills around prioritization and focus and backwards planning, both on like a personal level and on like a project management way. I think it's just been such a benefit and like such a joy to get that time back in my own life and be able to like see my team flourish as well based on it. So thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, careers are long. That's something I think we all have to be reminded of every once in a while, and realizing that, I thought of myself in Europe having to take like a giant career gap to be able to sit at a cafe, whereas actually I can just do that now by kind of molding these two things without necessarily sacrificing the quality or quantity even of the work that I do. So we did this because there were a lot of reasons, obviously, we just discussed over the last 53 minutes, but one of the big reasons is that it's important to us when we talk about culture, we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. This was a core tactic to employ as an organization to really do right by our people. So we did this slowly, very carefully. You're seeing a little bit of that in this session, doing some writing around this because we really believe in it now that we've gotten to see the proof in the pudding, not only Hustle Hunters, but also these other organizations. And we want to help other folks do this work. So reach out to myself and Arielle. You can find us at hustlehunters.com. There's all sorts of ways to get in touch with us and just ask about some focused work week pieces. And we'd love to set up an exploration call with y'all to answer some questions. We want to be as transparent as possible with the good and the challenges and our learnings from that, and really dive into what that could look like and how, as kind of business builders at Hustle Hunters, we might be able to support that process for y'all, recognizing that this isn't a snap of the fingers, and you probably already have 75 things on your plate. But if this is something your team wants to roll out, it's definitely something in our wheelhouse to help you support that rollout. So thank y'all for your time and attention. And whenever you're watching this, hopefully you get over to our website and get in contact because we're really eager to chat with y'all. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Arielle. Bye.
Thank you.